Now, before I begin, Peter, what time does the game start? 12, okay, just so I know how long I've got. Please be seated. One dark night, fired with love's urgent longings, the sheer grace, I went out unseen, my house being now all stilled. In darkness and secure, by the secret ladder disguised, the sheer grace. In darkness and concealment, my house being now all stilled. On that glad night in secret, for no one saw me, nor did I look at anything, with no other light or guide than the one that burned in my heart. This guided me more surely than the light of noon to where he was awaiting me. Him I knew so well, there in a place where no one appeared. O guiding night, O night more lovely than the dawn, O night that has united the lover with his beloved, transforming the beloved in her lover. Upon my flowering breast, which I kept holy for him alone, there he lay sleeping, and I caressing him, there in a breeze from the fanning cedars. When the breeze blew from the turret, as I parted his hair, it wounded my neck with its gentle hand, suspending all my senses. I abandoned and forgot myself, laying my face on my beloved. All things ceased. I went out from myself, leaving my cares forgotten among the lilies. Hannah, who is that? John of the Cross, which I'm grateful to Hannah for giving me a copy of his writing. And just in case you thought this was about something else, this poem about the dark night of the soul by John of the Cross is famously about John of the Cross finding God in his darkness, what we would now probably call his depression. Christianity suffers from a very common misconception. Lots of people think that you have to be both happy and nice to be a Christian. Maybe that's just to be a Minnesotan. People should see, I think, that we find joy in our faith, but for me that's the sort of deeper joy that may not be as obvious on the surface. And it is essential, don't get me wrong, that we are loving. But what of those people who don't see themselves in the stereotypical Pollyanna-ish demeanour of a Christian? If indeed Pollyanna is still in the dictionary. For those of you who are of a certain age, you'll maybe know what I mean. It is important for us also to remember that people have always found God and continue to find God in pain and in darkness too. I've heard long experienced priests talk about how the longer you have your faith for and the deeper your faith, the harder it gets. That sounds rather counterintuitive. Surely your faith should make things easier and easier. It may do for some people, but God is a mystery to be entered rather than a problem to be solved. Yes, we are to apply our mind to difficult philosophical questions about the nature of God and our salvation. But more important than those questions is to sit with God, to walk with God, and to wrestle with God. We all know the parable of the sower. The seed that is sown in shallow ground sprouts quickly, but it has no roots and so dies. Similarly, sometimes people find the joy of faith very quickly, but then hit a difficult patch and it withers. The basic tenets of our faith aren't necessarily what keep us going, what deepens our faith. Only long experience of God in our lives, including wrestling with God, does that. And it is that wrestling that we find expressed so powerfully in our first reading this morning. Jacob wrestles with an unknown man until daybreak. And this is what reminded me of John of the Cross's Dark Night of the Soul. But just as St. John wanders in the night, unable to sleep, so Jacob wrestles hard. At first it sounds as though the man is the one who has come upon Jacob and he's begun to try to overpower him, though he cannot. And do feel free to remind yourself of the reading if you just flick back in your bulletins. So we hear the man coming upon Jacob and wrestling with him. But then we hear the mysterious man asking Jacob to let him go. We're not told what's changed in this dynamic during the night. But the man has come on Jacob, and yes, it is the man that then asks Jacob to let him go. Despite already having struck Jacob on the hip socket, because he could not overpower him, now Jacob will not let this man go. I will not let you go unless you bless me. How strange to continue wrestling this man who has appeared from nowhere. Why strive with him rather than try to extract yourself as quickly as possible and let this strange man go? Well, the answer is, of course, that this is not a man. This man that he has been wrestling with, using all his strength, flesh to flesh, is the Lord. He is God. You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed. We are told that he has prevailed strangely, and yet he has not beaten God. Rather, that he has not let God go. He asks God's name and is not told it, though his own name changes, and he receives God's blessing, though leaves limping. Similarly, St. John the Divine is wounded in that poem I read to you. All his senses are suspended. He abandoned and forgot himself, laying my face on my beloved. All things ceased. I went out from myself. How like our wrestlings with God are these two strange, poetic stories. And I think you really need to know pain in order to get this faith of ours. To get to Easter Day, you need to experience Good Friday. And that is not something you can manufacture. Paradoxically, it is not even something we should really want. It is awful to go through. And yet, if we can come through in company with God, we will know God more truly than we did before. There was a priest called Michael Main who was at my old college where I was an undergraduate and went on to become Dean of Westminster Abbey. He wrote a number of books, but his most powerful book, and in my view his best, is his diary of dying of cancer, and it's called The Enduring Melody. In it he writes of his daily struggles, of the awfulness of the seemingly endless torture of his various treatments, which I know too many of us have seen our relatives and other loved ones go through. And indeed, it's appropriate that today, as I mentioned, was the first of our faith forums on grief. And I was really struck by how many of you were there, including, very rarely, our book group coming along, which shows how much we all need this kind of work together. And thank you to Matt for leading it. I just want to read a passage from Michael Main's book. It's a bit of a long passage, so I hope it won't take us to 12 o'clock. The options are very limited. He writes this after his final trip to see his oncologist. The radiotherapy was so fierce that it can't be repeated. Surgery would not work, as a wound would not heal. I have said no to aggressive chemotherapy. That leaves the possibility of a milder form of the latter, a weekly injection and pills after 24 hours to counteract the poison. Side effects are likely to be tiredness, nausea, and gritty eyes. It works in 1 out of 4 cases and might lead to a few more months of life. We have a few days to think it over, but I know already what we'll opt for: quality, not quantity of days. Even though I knew this would be the outcome, there is still a sense of shock in hearing it spelled out so finely, and part of me wants to weep and feel nothing but fear and dismay. And with that's Alison, his wife, from time to time I am racked by sobs which indicate just what lies under the attempt at a brave face. In the psalmist's words, "My spirit faints within me. My heart within me is desolate. I remember the time past. I consider the works of your hands. O Lord, make haste to answer me. My spirit fails me. Hide not your face from me, lest I be like those who go down to the pit." When he was dying of a rapid cancer, my friend and colleague Giles Eccleston spoke of his attempt to view his death as a gift. That's hard. Some will think even a bit perverse. And yet he was entirely right. Our lives are a sheer gift, as is the creation, and that our little lives are rounded with a sleep, as they transmute from one phase to the next, whatever that may be, is as natural as being born. We each choose to die in our own way, though for some it will be harder than for others. But if we can see it as gift, then it will be so insofar as we face it in such a way as to draw good out of it, trying however reluctantly, however painfully, to deliberately unseal our clenched fists and let go of what we have been given with open hands, to die with gratitude for all that has been, without resentment for what you are going through, and with openness towards the future, is the greatest gift we can leave those who love us and who are left behind. In these past weeks, I've been pondering on the ordered rhythm of the seasons. The swifts are back, threading the air. The woods are dappled with wild blossom, and the gardens full of the scent of lilac. The thrush claims his territory, early and late. The hedgerows are hung with May. Each witnesses to change, to the annual pattern of death and new life. Each summons us to a sense of wonder at nature's cantus firmus, a melody that is both hopeful and enduring. In his agony and railing against the misery of it all, he forces himself to pray to God and even to give thanks for the small joys of his life. On the eve of Michael Maine's funeral, which was also All Souls, I was at Westminster Abbey for their Requiem Eucharist, where I had gone to pray for a school friend who had killed himself a few years before. Afterwards, the bells started to ring half-muffled for their lamented former dean, finally taken by cancer. And I started to cry for my friend. I started to cry after the service had finished, louder and louder. You know what it's like when those floodgates that you thought you might be able to keep closed refuse to stay closed, and nothing will stop you. Well, that was me, and I was there in the choir at the Abbey thinking, this is just awful. And a priest there did something very wise and kind to me, and he put me in a side chapel and locked the door. He came back some time later, once all the lights in the Abbey had been turned off and the main doors had been locked. and he showed me out into the cloister by a side door. I did not go out leaving my cares forgotten among the lilies, as St. John of the Cross did, but I needed to follow Jesus' instruction in this morning's Gospel, to cry to him day and night. That crying to him when there is nothing else left is what both John of the Cross and Michael Main describe far better than I ever could. That agony and shouting at God about it is central to our faith, I think. And as we heard in that passage from Michael Main, represents a massive part of our scripture, particularly in the Psalms. I know I'm tempted sometimes to think I have to explain away my pain in some way before I offer it to God. But that is to think that I have to have the answers before I go to God, which is actually a form of arrogance. It is for us to cry out to God day and night with whatever is on our heart, trusting in God's answer, whatever that may be. Now, you may wonder why I have given you a picture next to our reading from Genesis in our bulletin, which you might want to have a look at now, which I have not actually said anything about. But this is one of my favourite sculptures, which is in the Tate Britain. It's just a 5-minute walk from where I used to live. And I used to go to walk around it, and all our big galleries in Britain are free, being what some people here might think is a socialist culture. But this is Jacob Epstein's sculpture of Jacob and the angel. From most angles, as you walk around it, it looks as though Jacob is wrestling with the angel. But from the sides, from the angle that I've given you there, we see something different. We see that in his apparent wrestling with the angel, when Jacob thinks he is not letting the man go, as he fights with all his might into a state of exhaustion, he is in fact being held up by God, though he does not know it.